The Meadow's secret. The glow in the trees. Henry had grown used to the quiet rhythm of his new life. The days no longer dragged the way they once did, not since Margaret had begun walking with him and Buddy every evening. Their steps, once solitary, now struck a soft rhythm against the lantern-lit paths of town, the kind of music that only companionship could create. It was subtle at first, the way she glanced at him when he laughed, the way her hand sometimes brushed his arm as they walked. Henry felt younger, yes, but more than that, he felt seen. Every evening when dusk settled and the air turned cool, he knew she would be waiting, and that thought alone gave his heart a boyish skip. But Margaret noticed things too. She noticed how Henry climbed the porch steps two at a time now, when months ago he had leaned on the railing for support. She noticed how his back no longer bowed with age but seemed straighter, how his eyes held a shine she had not seen before. At first, she chalked it up to happiness, the kind of miracle that affection can stir in an aging soul. Yet a quiet suspicion gnawed at her. This was something more. One late evening, after they had parted at her gate, she lingered in her garden, staring at Henry's retreating figure. Buddy trotted beside him, tail wagging, until suddenly the dog stopped, ears pricked. Without warning, Buddy darted down the street toward the dark line of trees at the edge of town. "Buddy," Henry called, breaking into a run that looked far too effortless for a man of 71. Margaret froze, her breath catching. She should turn back. It was none of her business. But her feet moved on their own, carrying her after him. The night air grew cooler as she reached the forest's edge. Branches whispered overhead, and somewhere ahead she heard the crunch of Henry's footsteps. Then she saw it. A glow. Not the warm amber of a lantern or the silver cast of the moon, but something softer, stranger. A pale golden radiance pulsed between the trees as though the very air shimmered with hidden light. Margaret's heart thudded. She pressed forward, each step a battle between fear and a deep, irresistible pull. She found Henry standing at the edge of a clearing, Buddy circling his feet. The meadow lay before them, bathed in that impossible glow. The grass seemed alive, the air itself trembling with sparks like fireflies made of starlight. Henry turned, startled to see her. His mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came. Margaret stepped into the clearing before he could stop her, and then it happened. The ache in her knees, the stiffness in her shoulders, the heaviness that had clung to her body for years, gone. She gasped, breath flooding her lungs as though she were breathing for the first time. Her limbs felt light, her posture straight. She lifted her hands, staring at them as if they belonged to a younger woman. "Henry," her voice shook. "What is this place?" He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "I didn't want you to find out like this." Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with awe. She spun slowly, letting the meadow's glow wash over her. It was like standing in the heart of a dream. Tears stung her eyes. For years, she had resigned herself to decline, to fading quietly into old age. Yet, here she was, vibrant, alive, her heart pounding with the fire of 30. She turned back to Henry, and for the first time she saw not just the man he had become, but the boy he once was flickering in his smile. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. Henry stepped closer, voice low. "Because I was afraid. Afraid it would vanish if I shared it. Afraid you wouldn't believe me. And maybe, afraid you'd walk away." Margaret laughed through her tears, shaking her head. "Walk away? Henry, this is impossible, and yet." She reached for his hand, gripping it tight. "I feel alive." The glow wrapped around them like a promise, the meadow breathing softly with its strange eternal light. For a long moment, they simply stood there, hands entwined, two souls rediscovering youth not just in body but in spirit. Margaret tilted her head, eyes shining. "So this is your secret?" Henry nodded, the fear in his face replaced by something tender, unguarded. "Our secret now." And as Buddy barked once, joyfully, the meadow seemed to hum in agreement. That night, Henry barely slept. The images of the meadow kept returning to him. The impossible glow of the grass, the way his lungs had filled with air as if they were brand new, the sight of Margaret's laughter spilling freely under the golden sky. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his heart restless, his hands tingling with an energy that begged to be spent. By morning, he felt a surge of mischief he hadn't known in decades. He dug out his old toolkit from the shed and spent hours repairing the creaky back steps of his porch. The boards had groaned for years, but now, with steady hands and a firm back, he replaced them one by one. Sweat streaked his brow, but it felt clean, refreshing, not the exhausting labor he had grown used to. When he finished, he stood back, gazing at the straight, solid steps with a satisfaction that made him grin. Margaret noticed, too. Passing by on her way to the market, she paused. "You've been busy," she remarked, her voice tinged with surprise. Henry chuckled, brushing sawdust from his hands. "Felt like the old steps deserved a second chance. Guess I did too." She lingered, studying him. Something about his posture, the brightness in his eyes, unsettled her in the gentlest way. It was as if the Henry she had once glimpsed in youth, the one with boundless energy and charm, had returned for a visit. That evening when the sun dipped low, Henry took Buddy out again. This time, the dog didn't pull so urgently, but Henry found himself scanning the forest's edge anyway. Part of him longed for the meadow, and part of him feared it. He wondered if it had truly changed him, or if it had merely awakened what had been dormant all along. As he watched Buddy chase fireflies across the lawn, Henry whispered to the twilight, "If it's a gift, I'll use it wisely. If it's a test, I'll be ready." The night air wrapped around him like a promise, and for the first time in years, Henry felt not old, but timeless. The next morning, Margaret woke with a start. For a moment, she thought she had dreamed it all. The meadow, the glow, the sudden rush of vitality. But when she swung her legs over the side of the bed, there was no ache in her knees. She rose effortlessly, her body moving with a grace she had not known in decades. She caught her reflection in the mirror. Her hair was still silver, yes, but her eyes gleamed with the brightness of her younger self. Her skin held a warmth it hadn't in years. She touched her own face and laughed softly, disbelieving, yet giddy. The memory of Henry's hand in hers returned like a flame. She hadn't felt that alive, that desired in so long. By afternoon, she found herself wandering to Henry's porch. He was already outside, sanding an old chair, his movements brisk and sure. Buddy lay stretched in the sun, ears twitching. Henry looked up as she approached, and his smile widened with a boyishness that melted her heart. "You feel it too, don't you?" he asked. Margaret exhaled a trembling laugh. "Henry, I feel like I could run a mile. No, 10 miles." He chuckled, setting the sandpaper aside. "I know. That's how it starts. The first time I thought I was imagining it, but it doesn't go away. Not right away, at least." She tilted her head, catching the edge in his tone. "Not right away?" Henry hesitated, his smile fading into something more thoughtful. "The meadow gives, but it doesn't last forever, a few weeks maybe. Then the heaviness comes back. The aches, that's when Buddy leads me there again." Margaret glanced down at the dog, who wagged his tail lazily. "So you've been returning?" "Yes," Henry admitted, his gaze drifting toward the trees. "For months now, always with Buddy. Without him, I can't find it. He knows the way, not me." A silence stretched between them, filled with birdsong and the distant hum of cicadas. Margaret folded her arms, her heart racing. "And you never wondered why?" Henry gave a weary sigh. "I've wondered every day, but I stopped asking. I was too grateful. After Marjorie passed, I thought my body was just a shell waiting to give out. Then the meadow gave me time, strength, the will to live again." Margaret stepped closer, searching his face. "But Henry, if it gives, then surely it takes. Nothing in life is free." Her words hung in the air, heavier than she intended. Henry's jaw tightened. He didn't argue. He couldn't. He had felt it too, though he had buried the thought. Buddy stirred, rising to his paws. He padded toward the tree line, pausing as if to beckon them. Henry followed the movement with wary eyes. "Sometimes," he confessed, voice low, "I wonder if it's him, Buddy. I feel like the meadow uses him somehow, that maybe my youth comes at his expense." Margaret's breath caught. She looked at the dog, suddenly aware of the silver beginning to show around his muzzle, the faint slowness in his gait. "Henry, I don't know," he said quickly, shaking his head as though to chase the thought away. Maybe it's just age catching up with him. Maybe it's nothing. But the uncertainty in his voice betrayed him. Margaret reached for his hand, steadying him with her touch. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together. No more secrets. If the meadow is a gift, then it's ours to understand. And if it has a price," her eyes softened, determined, "we'll decide if it's worth paying." Henry looked at her, the meadow's glow still lingering in his gaze, though the morning sun shone plain. For the first time, he felt both hope and fear intertwine like roots beneath the soil. The meadow had given them youth, yes, but it had also planted a question that could not be ignored. And deep inside, Henry knew the true story of the meadow was only beginning. That evening, after leaving Henry's porch, Margaret found herself humming. At first, it was a whisper, just a half forgotten tune from her youth, but before long, she was singing aloud as she moved about her kitchen. Her voice, though silvered by age, carried a clarity she hadn't heard in years. It startled her and then delighted her. She laughed, shaking her head, wondering if the meadow had awakened not only her body but her spirit too. Later, Henry appeared at her gate with Buddy trotting proudly at his side. "A walk?" he asked simply, and she could not say no. The evening air was soft, carrying the faint perfume of lilacs. They walked the familiar lanes, speaking first of little things, then of memories that seemed to surface as easily as breath. Margaret told him of nights in college dormitories where she and her friends had danced wildly to Bee Gees records, their voices hoarse from singing along. Henry smiled, recounting the summer evenings when he and his buddies gathered around a fire with guitars, singing Beatles songs until the stars blurred overhead. Buddy padded a few steps ahead, occasionally glancing back as though to remind them he was still leading. When they reached their homes again, the moon had risen, fuller and brighter than Margaret remembered seeing in years. She stood for a moment, gazing up. For the first time in decades, she felt not only alive but lit from within, as though the night itself had conspired to keep her glowing. The path through the trees was the same as always, narrow, shaded, with roots twisting like old veins across the soil. And yet, as Henry and Margaret followed Buddy deeper into the forest, Margaret felt something shift. The air grew lighter, warmer, carrying a faint hum like music just beyond hearing. When they stepped into the clearing, she stopped in her tracks, breath stolen from her chest. The meadow lay before them, and this time it was not just glowing, it was alive. The grass shimmered with impossible greens, each blade sharp and vivid, as though painted by the hand of a master artist. Wildflowers scattered through the field burned with hues she could not name, colors that seemed to dance as the light touched them. Above, the sky was no longer a simple blue, but a deep, endless canvas streaked with gold and rose, the kind of sky one only glimpses in memory or dream. Birdsong rang out clear and bright, melodies layered together in a chorus that made Margaret's heart ache with joy. She closed her eyes, letting the sound wash through her, and when she opened them again, tears had gathered without her knowing. "Henry," she whispered, her voice trembling, "it's more beautiful than before." Henry stood beside her, watching the meadow with the quiet reverence of a pilgrim at an altar. "It always is," he said softly. "Every time it feels new, as if it knows we're different now and shows us more." Buddy bounded ahead, tail wagging, and lay down in the grass, rolling as if it were the sweetest bed in the world. Margaret laughed, the sound younger than she remembered it being in years. She stepped forward, her feet sinking into the meadow's softness. It felt like walking on air. The two of them wandered deeper, hand in hand. Every sense was heightened, the scent of blossoms richer, the warmth of sunlight more tender. Even the breeze seemed to carry whispers that brushed their skin like silk. Margaret spun slowly, arms open wide. "It's like the world out there is only half alive," she said breathlessly. "And here it's whole." Henry watched her with a smile that carried both awe and affection. She looked radiant, her silver hair catching the meadow's light as though it had been spun into threads of gold. For a moment he saw not just the woman she was, but the vibrant young spirit within her, unburdened and free. "Do you feel it?" he asked. She turned to him, eyes glistening. "I don't just feel it. I am it." They sat together in the grass, and the meadow seemed to lean closer, its colors pulsing softly around them. The air hummed, not with menace but with presence, as if the meadow itself was aware, listening, breathing with them. Henry's hand tightened around hers. "Sometimes I wonder if this place is alive." Margaret tilted her head, considering. "If it is, then it chose us." The thought settled between them, both comforting and unsettling. They sat in silence, listening to the chorus of birds, watching the wind ripple across the field in waves of green and gold, and for the first time Margaret realized the meadow wasn't just granting them youth, it was showing them a world more vivid than the one they thought they knew, a world they might never want to leave. But Schutzloff, colors of the impossible. They lay together in the meadow, the air humming gently around them. Henry reached into his bag and pulled out a small, weathered notebook. Its pages were soft at the edges. The ink faded in places. "I've been keeping track," he admitted. "Every visit, every change." Margaret opened it with reverence, as if the little book contained a secret scripture. The pages were crowded with his slanted handwriting. Entries about the first time his knees stopped aching, about waking one morning without pain in his back, about the astonishing strength that had returned to his hands. Her throat tightened as she read aloud, "Today I lifted the woodpile without groaning. For a moment I was 30 again." Margaret closed the book and pressed it against her chest. "Henry, this is not just your record. It's your testament, proof that you refuse to surrender." Tears blurred her eyes, but they were tears of wonder. Above them, a flock of birds swept across the sky, their wings scattering light like a shower of jewels. The meadow seemed to breathe with them, amplifying every beat of their hearts. Margaret felt it then with a certainty that shook her. The place responded to them. She turned, whispering, "Maybe it's not only a gift. Maybe it's a mirror. It reflects the life we allow ourselves to feel." Henry's answer was silence, but his hand tightened firmly around hers, and that was more than enough. The days that followed fell into a rhythm, quiet yet full of wonder. Every evening, when the sun slid low and the shadows stretched long across the quiet streets of their town, Henry and Margaret would meet at the gate. Buddy would be waiting, tail already wagging, as if he alone knew the true importance of their ritual. At first, the walks were simple, a stroll around the block, the kind neighbors might have taken notice of and smiled at. But soon the paths grew longer, winding through the park where the old oak trees stood like guardians, their branches heavy with summer leaves. The air carried the scent of cut grass, roses blooming by fences, and sometimes the sharp tang of rain lingering from an afternoon shower. With each walk, Margaret found herself laughing more. Henry, too, discovered that stories poured out of him, small, forgotten details of his youth, the pranks he and his friends once played, the endless nights of music and bonfires. She listened with wide eyes, realizing how much of him she had never truly known, even after years of living just next door. One evening, as the lamplight flickered on along the park's pathway, Henry stopped beneath the glow of a single lantern. The warm circle of light wrapped them in intimacy, the world beyond fading into gentle shadow. Buddy sniffed at the grass, patient and content. "Margaret," Henry said softly, almost hesitantly, "do you ever wonder why it's happening to us? Why now?" She turned to him, her silver hair catching the glow of the lamp like threads of spun glass. Her eyes softened, not with uncertainty, but with a quiet courage. "Perhaps because we're finally ready to live again. Perhaps because we've been given another chance to choose, and this time to choose joy." Her words struck him deeply, more than she knew. For years he had lived in half light, weighed down by loss, by age, by the inevitability of decline. But now, walking with her, hand brushing against hand, he felt that inevitability breaking apart, scattering like mist in the morning sun. From that night forward, their evening walks were no longer just habit. They became a promise to keep seeking, to keep feeling, to keep living, not as if their lives were ending, but as if they were beginning anew. And always, just ahead, Buddy trotted with a quiet dignity, his presence a reminder that somewhere beyond the veil of ordinary life, the meadow waited. The meadow with its impossible colors, its radiant air, its gift of second chances. Neither Henry nor Margaret spoke of it aloud, not every time, but both knew. The meadow had changed them, and now the glow it had given was no longer just in their bodies, but in their hearts, in the way they looked at each other, in the way the night's silence felt full instead of empty. As the town's bells rang softly in the distance and the park lights guided their path home, Margaret reached for Henry's arm. He did not hesitate, and she did not let go. Their walks became daily, not out of obligation, but out of quiet hunger for the company, the laughter, the warmth that seemed to multiply each time. Evening after evening, step after step, they discovered that the true gift was not youth restored, but love reborn. And under the calm watch of the stars, Henry whispered to himself, "This is what forever feels like." The following week unfolded like a gentle dream. Each night held its own character, as if the world itself wished to offer them variations of wonder. One evening, rain had passed only hours before, leaving the park washed clean. Drops still clung to the tips of leaves, and the lamplight scattered into 1,000 glimmers. Margaret tilted her head back, catching the earthy scent of wet soil. "Do you hear it?" she asked. Henry frowned, listening. It wasn't silence he heard, but a softened hush, as if the world was whispering lullabies to the night. Another time, they walked while autumn crept closer. The first leaves had begun to turn amber and red, spiraling gently to the ground. Henry bent to pick one up, twirling it between his fingers. "Strange," he said. "I used to see these and think of endings. Now they feel like beginnings." Margaret touched the leaf, her smile wistful. "Perhaps everything is both, depending on how we look at it." Buddy ran ahead, barking at the scattering leaves, his joy so pure that Henry laughed until his chest ached, not with weakness, but with delight. Margaret joined in, her laughter blending with his until they leaned against each other, breathless. Their conversations grew deeper as the walks lengthened. They spoke not just of the meadow, but of the lives they had lived before it. Henry told her of nights in Vietnam when he clutched a photo of his late wife, swearing to survive for her. Margaret confessed how loneliness had weighed on her after her own husband's passing, how she filled her days with busy work but never felt whole. "Do you think," Margaret asked one night as they crossed a quiet bridge, "that love can truly return? Not just the memory of it, but the living, breathing thing?" Henry slowed, his hand brushing hers until he finally laced their fingers together. "I think it never leaves. It waits. Sometimes it waits longer than we want, but when it finds the right moment—" He looked into her eyes, the lamplight shimmering in her silver hair. "It becomes stronger than before." She squeezed his hand, and for a long while they said nothing. Their silence was not emptiness, but a fullness too fragile to break with words. That night, as Buddy curled at Henry's feet back home, Henry sat at his window looking out toward the dark line of trees beyond town. Somewhere out there, the meadow shimmered in impossible colors, waiting. But tonight he realized the glow was already here, in the rhythm of their footsteps, in Margaret's laughter, in the promise of tomorrow's walk. For the first time in decades, Henry felt not only alive, but eager for the days to come. The morning mist still lingered over the village, softening the edges of rooftops and hedges, as if the world itself was reluctant to start the day. Henry and Margaret had walked slowly through the garden, letting the familiar scents of lavender and rosemary guide them. Buddy padded beside them, his tail wagging in quiet anticipation, as if he, too, felt that something significant awaited them. For days now, the meadow had lingered in their thoughts like a half-remembered dream. Every time they thought of it, warmth and youth surged through them, but so did a shadow of concern. Henry glanced at Margaret, noticing the light in her eyes, a light that mirrored his own wonder. "Are you ready?" he asked softly, not needing words to explain what he meant. Margaret smiled, brushing a strand of silver hair behind her ear. "I think I've been ready all my life," she replied, her voice steady but filled with quiet excitement. The path into the forest had changed again. No longer a simple trail marked by faint footsteps. It now twisted like a ribbon of silver through trees that seemed to lean closer with curiosity. The sun pierced the canopy in shafts of golden light, illuminating motes of dust and pollen that danced in the air. Buddy trotted ahead, ears perked, guiding them with an instinct that was almost human. Henry reached for Margaret's hand, feeling the familiar warmth, the reassurance that no matter what lay ahead, they would face it together. When they arrived at the clearing, Henry's breath caught. The meadow had transformed once more. Grass shimmered with dew that glowed faintly in hues of rose and amber. Flowers they didn't recognize swayed gently, releasing delicate fragrances that seemed to resonate with memories of their youth. In the center, a circle of ancient stones hummed with a vibration that tickled the skin. It was as though the meadow itself was alive, observing them, testing them. Margaret stepped forward first, feeling the soft pull in her chest, a gentle invitation. As her feet sank into the cool grass, she felt a wave of energy rush through her body, stronger than ever before. Every ache she had carried for decades faded, replaced by a lightness she had thought lost forever. She laughed softly, a sound of pure delight that echoed across the meadow. Henry joined her, his own senses flooded with the same elation. "It's more than I imagined," he whispered. "It's not just youth. It's a feeling of being truly alive." Yet, amid the wonder, a quiet hesitation lingered. They both remembered Buddy's slow aging, the subtle exhaustion that had followed their previous visits. The meadow gave, but it also took. Margaret knelt, running her fingers over the soft fur of their companion. "We can't forget him," she said gently. "This gift, it isn't ours alone. It asks for balance." Henry nodded, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "Every miracle has its cost," he murmured, "and some costs we can't see until it's too late." They walked together toward the center of the circle of stones, the meadow responding to their presence. Soft light wrapped around them, filling the space between them with warmth and clarity. Henry looked at Margaret, really looked, and saw not just the youth restored by the meadow, but the wisdom, patience, and love that had carried her through years of life's challenges. He realized then that the true miracle was not in reclaiming what had passed, but in the courage to embrace the moment fully. A gentle wind stirred the air, and with it came whispers, faint as if spoken by the meadow itself. Words formed in Henry's mind: "The choice is yours. Cherish what is. Honor what must remain." He glanced at Margaret, seeing mirrored in her eyes the same understanding. They could take the gift endlessly, surrendering themselves to an eternal illusion, or they could accept it sparingly, letting its magic enhance their lives without letting it consume them, or their beloved companion. Margaret reached out, taking Henry's hand in both of hers. "I think we've already made the right choice," she said softly. "It's not about stopping time, Henry. It's about choosing how we live it." Henry squeezed her hand, feeling the truth of her words resonate deep within. The meadow seemed to pulse in agreement, as though approving of their resolve. They spent what felt like hours in the clearing, walking slowly, listening to the sounds of the forest, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant call of birds, the hum of life that existed beyond human measure. They didn't need to speak much. Every glance, every shared breath communicated 1,000 words. Henry thought of all the years he had lived, all the moments he had cherished, and realized that none of them compared to this simple, shared understanding of love and respect for life itself. Buddy barked softly, bringing them back from their reverie. They knelt to stroke him, marveling at the small miracle of his presence, alive and steadfast. It was then they noticed that the meadow itself seemed to shift. Where the clearing had been before, a new path now shimmered faintly in the light, a path that promised something beyond even this magical space. It was a reminder that life, like the meadow, never truly ends. It transforms, opens new doors, and offers endless possibilities. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gold, Henry and Margaret walked back hand in hand, Buddy trotting joyfully at their side. They didn't rush. There was no need. Every step was a celebration of the moment, a quiet acknowledgement that while the meadow offered extraordinary gifts, the greatest wonder lay in their shared journey, in the love that had grown between them. Margaret leaned her head on Henry's shoulder, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat, steady and real. "We don't need forever," she whispered. "We just need now. Together." Henry smiled, pressing a gentle kiss to her hair. "Now and always," he replied. The forest seemed to echo their sentiment, leaves shimmering in the evening light, as if the world itself had taken a deep, contented breath. The meadow would always exist, a secret sanctuary of youth and vitality. But more importantly, it had shown them something enduring, that miracles are not merely in defying age or time, but in recognizing the beauty of what already exists, in the gentle strength of a companion's loyalty, in the quiet connection of hearts intertwined, in the courage to choose love over desire and wisdom over endless indulgence. As they emerged from the forest, the village lights glimmered softly ahead, a reminder of the life waiting for them beyond the meadow's spell. They walked slowly, savoring each step, aware that the magic they had experienced would remain with them, not as an escape, but as a guide, a subtle reminder of life's preciousness and the wonder of choosing wisely. And in that moment, Henry and Margaret understood, fully and completely, that the true miracle had never been the meadow itself. It had always been them, together, awake to the beauty of life. hand in hand, hearts open, ready to face whatever path lay ahead.